Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about the number one overall pick of the 2019 NFL Draft, Kyler Murray. Former Heisman-winning quarterback for the University of Oklahoma was drafted number one overall by the Arizona Cardinals yesterday in the first round of the NFL Draft. So we're going to be talking about the fantasy implications to Kyler Murray joining the Arizona Cardinals and where exactly I see him performing in the 2019 fantasy football season, along with my thoughts on the players that will be surrounding him, such as David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, and how they stand to honestly just improve their statistical output come 2019 due to the addition to Kyler Murray to this team. So without further ado, let's talk about that, shall we? Hey everybody, how's it going? All right, so I had a couple thoughts on hand. Obviously, I'm going to only be talking about Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals today. I will be doing a video talking about the breakdown of every team's draft by this weekend. Just kind of giving you an idea of when that'll be out, probably towards Sunday, because actually maybe Saturday, Sunday. It just depends on how much time I have with Avengers Endgame coming out. No big deal. So anyway, again, Kyler Murray taking number one overall, and this has really just been kind of a thought that's been going around for at least the last month and a half, that he's going to be he was the consensus number one overall pick, with the quotes that were taken from Kyle Kingsbury, the coach of the Arizona Cardinals, months before he was even hired as the head coach, saying, if I had the opportunity at the number one overall pick, I would take Kyler Murray. He did exactly that. He was a man of his word, and he took this quarterback. Now, the question, is looming, where does Josh Rosen go and stuff like that? Just want to put it out there. The reports that I've been hearing as of late is that the number one team that is probably going to land Josh Rosen's services is probably the Miami Dolphins as of right now. They don't have Ryan Tannehill anymore. He is on the Tennessee Titans, but they do have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who they took over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, yes, they have a veteran quarterback, but if you can go ahead, you can land Josh Rosen, and you feel confident with his services, then yeah, that's great. But other than that, the other thoughts that have been going around, perhaps the Bengals may be interested in him, or perhaps teams like the Los Angeles Chargers or even the New England Patriots looking for a successor to their, long-standing quarterbacks. Those were a couple of thoughts thrown around. But anyway, let's talk about Kyler Murray. And let's step away from Josh Rosen, because let's be honest, Josh Rosen is not going to be the starting quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals in 2019 and going on to the future. He's going to probably be placed somewhere else within the next couple days, maybe hours, weeks, we'll see. But either way, let's talk about Kyler Murray and his statistical output in college in 2018, right? As many of us know, college football, a lot of their stats are inflated. Let's be honest. You don't play the best competition every single week. You're not playing NFL caliber players. Yes, each team does have NFL prospects on them, but you're not going into a situation where you're playing Alabama every single week. That's not the case. And we saw what he was able to do against Alabama. He had a tough time to say. So either way, I'm going to go over his stats. In the 14 games that Kyler Murray started last season, and prior to this season, 2018, he had never been a full starting quarterback of a team. The year prior, at Oklahoma, it was Baker Mayfield. The year prior to that, he was, a backup quarterback, I think, at Texas Tech. So really just, this was his full season, and the first time he's played a full season in college. So with those games, he had 260 passing completions on 377 passing attempts, which led to a 69% passing completion percentage. On top of that, he had 4,361 passing yards, 42 passing touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. So with those stats, those look great, right? If you get that out of a quarterback in the NFL, especially in fantasy, that's fantastic. But that's not what we're not gonna see that. We're not gonna see that immediately translate. Now, he may have the potential to do so, but that's not going to be the case, because when you're playing smaller schools in college, like I mentioned, it doesn't really translate to the NFL's defenses. Anyway, on top of those statistics, the thing that really makes Kyler Murray special, and in my opinion really presents him a lot of fantasy value, is his ability to run the ball, plain and simple. The guy last season in 2018 for the Oklahoma Sooners had 140 rushing attempts for 1,001 rushing yards, 12 rushing touchdowns. That was nearly 7.15 yards per rushing attempt. Goodness gracious, he was fantastic. Plain and simple. Statistically, great. He's the number one overall pick because the Arizona Cardinals believe he is the future, and they believe that they can build an offense around this this young man in order to be successful and help them win games. So let's talk about, what kind of a situation he's going into before I talk about his fantasy potential in 2019. As I mentioned before, Josh Rosen, he's going to be moved. But really, I don't really blame Josh Rosen for the production last season. He was put in a very, very difficult situation, plain and simple. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But overall, I mean, the 2018 stats of the Arizona Cardinals, they don't look good. And even though, yes, it could be placed on Josh Rosen's back, I think it's a collective effort, and I don't think we can just blame one quarterback for the mishaps that took place. Last season, the Arizona Cardinals only averaged 14 points per game, which was the 32nd ranked. They were the worst team when it came to scoring the football, plain and simple. They were awful, and they could never find the end zone, plain and simple. Obviously, they played in a tough division. You play against the Rams twice, the Seahawks twice, and the 49ers. Still, they're no joke. I mean, they still compete hard. On top of that, besides being the worst offense of the NFL last year, the Arizona Cardinals had the by far worst offensive line last season. According to Pro Football Focus's 2018, overview, through the 17 regular season weeks, the Arizona Cardinals were the 32nd ranked offensive line. They had 11 offensive linemen start at least 100 snaps, which means they just had a carousel at the offensive line position, whether it was injuries that plagued them or whether it was bad play and players getting replaced on a weekly basis. The Arizona Cardinals offensive line just was not good. They gave up 52 sacks last season. I mean, you can't expect your quarterback to be safe and healthy if your offensive line is not producing. On top of that, this offseason, the Arizona Cardinals, they've went about trying to address that issue. They've traded for Marcus Gilbert, former offensive tackle of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Great, you can bring in a talent there, protect the right side of the offensive line. On top of that, they brought in J.R. Sweezy, who's been an offensive lineman for the Seahawks for a good amount of time. I think he spent 1 year in Tampa Bay. But J.R. Sweezy, another good offensive guard that has been productive in the NFL. He's been in here for about 7 years, if I'm not mistaken. So 2 offensive linemen are being brought in to kind of bolster up this offensive line to make them better. They're losing a couple offensive linemen here and there, but that's not a big deal. As long as they can protect Kyler Murray, that's really all they need to look to do. Now, here's the thing that that kind of goes with the offensive line. If the offensive line breaks down, that's going to force Kyler Murray to run the ball, right? Especially if your pocket is collapsing, with his legs, with his ability to run the ball, that's going to present a lot of fantasy value in 2019. A couple names that I wanted to bring up just this last season, a bunch of young quarterbacks that are honestly running the ball and creating a lot of fantasy value for themselves. Specifically, last season, Deshaun Watson, 551 rushing yards. I mean, that is a lot, and he had 5 rushing touchdowns on top of that. Josh Allen had 631 rushing yards. I mean, whew, imagine Josh Allen, a guy that never ran in college or didn't run very often in college, translated to 631 rushing yards in the NFL. Another guy, Lamar Jackson, who is known for mainly being a guy that runs the ball. In his 7 starts as the starting quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens, he had 556 rushing yards. Another great guy. And Mitchell Trubisky last season, in his second year, 421 rushing yards. And he had the second highest ranked offensive line when it came to pass protection. And still, Mr. Trubisky was able to run the ball. So quarterbacks in the NFL, I mean, there's other guys like Russell Wilson and Cam Newton that are still out there. But quarterbacks in the NFL, they're being looked to run the ball and make more plays on a weekly basis with their legs. That is being a thing that in the NFL, defensive coordinators absolutely hate when they have to have a spy or keep a defensive end honest so they can't crash down. If you have a quarterback with legs that can produce with their feet, goodness gracious, it presents a bunch of fantasy value, and it presents, just an extra level of depth within that offensive game plan. All right, so let's talk about where I see Kyler Murray moving on and where he could potentially rank in 2019 as a quarterback. To be honest, in 12 quarterback leagues, right, where there's 12 teams and each team starts one quarterback only. He's really not going to be a player that you're going to focus. You're not going to draft him in your draft. To be honest, I think the NFL is a difficult environment, and it takes a little while to get used to, defenses understanding the playbook offensively and getting a rhythm and a kind of feel for the game, right? It's a different pace after the college level. Now, we've seen many college players come in and instantly adapt and just never slow down, and sometimes even improve in the NFL atmosphere. But as of right now, I see in a regular standard 12-team league in which you only start one quarterback, you're really not going to focus him. And I don't even think until we see him play, we're not going to even be able to predict him as a guy that we can say, oh, on your quarterback's bye week in a good matchup, we can pick him up, because we don't know what to expect. But as of right now, in my favorite league format, which is 2 quarterback or super flex formats, Kyler Murray is going to be on a roster, plain and simple. Now, what exactly, kind of value does he present? The rushing game, if he's able to move his legs and pick up, 400, 500 rushing yards this season and a couple touchdowns here and there, I mean, that in itself transitions to so many fantasy points. I mean, let's think about it, right? If you have 500 rushing yards in a single season, which we saw Josh Allen, we saw Lamar Jackson, we saw Deshaun Watson, and almost Mitchell Trubisky pretty much tally last season. I mean, 500 rushing yards, 50 fantasy points right there. If you add on a couple touchdowns, let's say you do 2 rushing touchdowns, you get 62 total fantasy points there. I mean, 62 total fantasy points comparatively to how many passing yards you need to go ahead and score 62 fantasy points. Let's pull out this calculator, shall we? All right, where's this calculator while we're here? All right, so if we want to match up 62 fantasy points, we're going to need this. You're going to need 1,550 passing yards extra. Or you can have those 500 rushing yards. That's literally the difference. So when we see these quarterbacks running the ball and not throwing as many yards, that's fine, because they're managing to score the fantasy points on the ground, and that's fantastic, especially with the capabilities that he has. So in a 2 QB league, absolutely is going to be on roster. Now, as of right now, I don't know where he's going to be drafted. His ADP is it's fluctuating at the moment. We don't know what we're going to see. Free agency is not over. The draft is not over. They could bring in more talent. They could bring in more offensive line help for him and end up having this offense look pretty decent. But as of right now, for sure, he is going to be in 2 quarterback leagues, whether he's starting or on roster. He's going to be in the league, and he's going to make a difference because of his ability to score, whether it's through the air or on the ground. Kyler Murray presents a lot of fantasy potential this season, and I like his upsides. Just that the work on the ground. Now, again, he's a rookie quarterback, but last season we saw Baker Mayfield come out, break the rookie passing touchdown record, 27, and become a top 15 quarterback in fantasy easily in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. So the jury's still out on whether Kyler Murray can produce. So only time will tell. So let's talk about the weapons that surround Kyler Murray and who stands to improve. And I honestly think everyone does. I think this offense is going to be more dynamic this season. Last year, really, they struggled up and down the board. A couple of statistics I wanted to read. Like, David Johnson is by far the most valuable piece on this offense, and a lot of us are curious on how David Johnson is going to be affected because of this decision. Last season in half-point PPR scoring formats, David Johnson was the number 10 running back, number 10 ranked running back in half-point PPR. In full-point PPR, he was the number 9 ranked running back. So here's the thing: last season in 2018, David Johnson's ADP sat around the 3rd or 4th, running back off the board, and ending up as the number 10th running back in a half-point PPR sense, really not that bad. Considering how terrible the Arizona Cardinals were offensively last year, I mean, he really played above his potential last season. I think he played well considering how bad the offensive line was, how bad the offense was. Again, they were last in points per game scored per team. And if you're not scoring a lot of points, that means your running back is not getting a lot of goal line work or a lot of touches here and there, especially because you're down in games and you're going to have to pass the ball. Yes, he had 76 targets, 50 receptions last year. That's David Johnson. But we've seen him in years past have 80-plus receptions. And, Josh Rosen really didn't target him much in the passing game, in which we expected him to do, but I digress. Here's the thing: last season, the Arizona Cardinals ran the ball on average 22 times a game, which ranked 28th amongst all teams. On top of that, they had the least rushing yards amongst all NFL teams with only 1,342 rushing yards. They had the lowest yards per carry average at 3.8 yards per carry, which was the least amongst all team, and they were tied for 27th amongst all teams with only 9 rushing touchdowns. I mean, they were terrible on the ground. Yet again, David Johnson was the number 10 running back. So what does that mean when you bring in a young gunslinger like Kyler Murray, who is going to open up this offense, that is going to present more fantasy value for the pieces around him? I 100% think David Johnson should be going up draft boards. I think as an RB1, that is certain. I think anywhere outside of the RB1 conversation is a mistake. I understand I talked about Sony Michel potentially being an RB1 last week in a video. Even that, I'm beginning to think, yeah, he's probably not an RB1 because it's going to take a lot for him, especially when he's not incorporated in the passing game. But when we have David Johnson being a 3-down back, I know Elijah Penny's sitting in the backfield and there's other running backs that steal carries here and there. But when he's a 3-down back and a guy that is very versatile and can control games in the passing game, third down work, I mean, he's going to be a top 12 running back without a doubt in my mind. And in half-point, full-point PPR, we've seen David Johnson be the number 1 overall running back in 2016. 2017 broke his wrist. Really didn't do anything. So we've seen him be productive, and I think the addition of Kyler Murray to this offense, the improvements to the offensive line, hopefully they can address more. They've made a lot of improvements in free agency to the defensive position. Obviously, I don't talk about that often because we're talking about fantasy, but still, David Johnson, I mean, goodness gracious, should be going up draft boards. I think his potential is absolutely going to go up, especially, I mean, he was the number 10 last season, and really, they were the worst rushing team in the NFL, plain and simple. So, I expect him to absolutely improve, and I expect David Johnson's number to go up. So, he's got a lot of potential this season. So let's talk about other players. I thought about other positions like another backup running back. Nope, not interested. Tight ends. Nope, not interested. I really want to focus on these 2 wide receivers, the 2 guys that they mainly have, Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk. Last season, both of them really they weren't productive at all. Larry Fitzgerald played all 16 games, averaged about 9.57 points per game in a half-point PPR scoring format, in which he was the number 26th wide receiver, making him, a high-end wide receiver 3. Going into this year, I mean, I understand Larry Fitzgerald's old, but he's Larry Legend, and if only time, proves Larry Fitzgerald's argument, the dude is just. He's not slowing down. Last season, 112 targets. I mean, he's going to continue to get peppered with targets. He's going to continue to be one of the, if not the best receiver in the league when it comes to just longevity and consistency. This guy's he's incredible. And I think with a young quarterback like Kyler Murray, you're going to have to find a rapport with the receiver. And I think Larry Fitzgerald is the number 1 guy you need to go ahead and connect with, because you can put him in the slot, you can put him outside, but he's going to be the safety blanket of this offense like he's been in years past. So Larry Fitzgerald, yes, I know he was a wide receiver 3 last year. He's definitely gotten older, but I think there's a potential for him to be a wide receiver 2 this year and definitely improve. On top of that conversation, we have Christian Kirk. In his second year out of Texas A&M, I think Christian Kirk, having only played 12 games last season, in those 12 games averaged 8.5 fantasy points until he broke his foot. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but the thing that Christian Kirk really presents is a, boom or bust kind of conversation. I know there were games in which, a lot of his games actually, in which he had about 6, 7, 8 points, but in those big games in which he had a reception for like 65 plus yards and a touchdown, and he made those speed plays in which he took the top off the defense, that's when he was most relevant. And I think if Kyler Murray can go ahead, lock himself down to just feeding the ball to a David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, and then over the top to Christian Kirk, who's an extremely talented wide receiver, these 3 guys can be an extremely valuable piece of this offense. Last season in 2018, the Arizona Cardinals offense, there was no value coming out of it. The tight end position, just bleak. It was terrible. It was actually maybe one of the worst. The Ricky Seals-Jones was awful last season. The wide receivers last season, Christian Kirk ended as the number 58 wide receiver. Larry Fitzgerald, the number 26. Again, these guys weren't great. David Johnson, yes, he was the number 10 running back, but I absolutely expect all these guys to improve, and I think Kyler Murray, as an addition to this offense, is definitely going to help. So anyway, thank you everybody for watching. If you want to stay tuned, I will have more videos coming out in the future about the NFL draft, talking about every team and where they, improved their team and maybe perhaps where they could have went after but didn't decide to. But either way, thank you everybody for watching. If you like this video, click that like button, and if you want to see more content, please subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. All right, thank you, and see you guys. Peace.